Thank you so much for joining us, Peter. Peter, why don't you get us started? Tell us about your orchard and what you grow and what inspires you to grow those things.
Actually, I've had a little orchard up in Yountville, Napa Valley. We've got a couple of customers. French Laundry is one of them, and actually Matt Acarino, who you're going to see a lot of. He is one of the inspirations for the orchard. It's got 120 different kinds of fruit trees. It's got, 25 different kinds of culinary flowers. I know the people in Puerto Rico are growing culinary flowers, and that was a great, I've been watching your show. Everybody, this has been fabulous, actually. And I brought you all some stuff. Got right here, kale, as you can see. Got the flowers with it. We'll talk more about that sort of thing. What inspires me? Actually, chefs inspire me. Plant Forward certainly inspires me. Listening to the talks, I was listening today of Chad Bronze, the Chipotle guy. He's talking about buy the whole farm. We're going to be talking about cover crops. Everything's inspirational. And I realize what drives it all forward is the imagination of thought leaders. And by the way, all chefs are thought leaders in their communities.
Yes, absolutely. When Chad was talking about the alfalfa and the cover and legumes and things to fix nitrogen in the soil, I was absolutely thinking about what we're about to talk about today in terms of looking at opportunity and seeing opportunity in various places.
Yeah, actually, opportunity is another word that came into it because the gentleman, the farmer in Georgia from yesterday, was talking about that opportunity is in every plant he sees. It's got to do with the chef's eyes, the imagination of things. And so everything we're seeing is opportunity. And I hope that sort of the imagination of people is elaborating that right now.
Yes, and I know that part of how you think about opportunity has been driven by your relationship with chefs. And you talked about Thomas Keller at the French Laundry, as well as Matthew Acarino, who's going to be joining us a little bit later live, although we've also got some videos from him that sort of help illustrate how he thinks about opportunity and creativity and spurred by you and inspired by you. But before we get to that, Peter, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about something you and I had discussed beforehand, this idea of chefs growing farmers, actually. Farmers grow things in the garden, farmers grow things in the fields, but you think of it as chefs growing farmers.
Yes, actually, it's an interesting concept because I realized as I was being trained, I've had our little farm for 35 years, and it only is for chefs and restaurants. And I realized after a while when I was learning from chefs that chefs can also grow farmers. And so I've grown based on the input from them. It's been crucial. And so some of you might say, well, I can't grow a farm. What can I grow a farm? I don't even have a farmer. Actually, what's interesting is right now we're talking about large farms or medium-sized farms. I contend that every chef that's listening has a farmer in their guest list this week. Literally, there's somebody in that, not so much a farm, you go, it's got cows and stuff like that. I'm talking, what's the definition of a farm? Actually, the definition of a farm is 128 square feet. Why 128 square feet? Because that's four sheets of plyboard. If you've got space for 4 sheets of plyboard in your backyard, you could grow some most esoteric radishes for the place down the street, and they would feature you, and this would be the most local boar they've ever gotten. The conversation's fabulous, and they're growing their own farm. But so it's, once again, the imagination. Find your farmer, grow your farmer, teach them what you want, but you need to interact with them. It takes an additional amount of time to create that farm connection.
Yeah, and you've built up this relationship with the chefs that you've been working with. I've now had the chance over a few years to see you and Matt Acarino building that relationship in the way that that has come to light. And actually, we've got this video from Matthew that he's going to talk a little bit about how he sees your role within his operation, within his restaurant, as well as his creativity. Just a note for you watching at home with us or in the office, we've got some videos coming in from different locales over the course of this next session. So you may just need to adjust your volume up or down accordingly. So let's take a look at this video from Matt Acarino first.
Hi everybody, Matthew Acarino, from SBQR here in San Francisco with one of my sous chefs, Alyssa Fiala. We've got a bounty of things here from Peter Jacobson up in Yountville at Jacobson's Orchards that he dropped off to us yesterday. I've been working with Peter here at the restaurant pretty much the entire time that I've been here at SBQR, which goes back quite a ways, but certainly back towards around 2010, 2011. One of the greatest things about Peter, in juxtaposition to all of my other farmers, is that Peter has this sort of 2 acres of magical farmland up there in Yountville, California. And he's particularly a person that's, for instance, not growing rows and rows and rows of one thing, like a lot of my other farmers are. He's more of an experimental garden, and being able to go up there and spend time with him, he will have all of these different things that he's not really growing to sell in quantity to a lot of other restaurants. He primarily works with the French Laundry, a bit with us and a few other chefs. And so when he brings me things, they're usually the things that I didn't ask for and probably the things that I didn't want. But that's really trained me over all the years to be able to consider, for instance, what's in front of us right now, where we've got, you know, some beginnings of the bachelor buttons that he's brought for us. We've got the fava leaves that have some of the fava flowers attached to them there. So that's kind of a natural thing that would be happening. We could use some of those at this time of the year. This beautiful broccoli flowers, and this broccoli is kind of going to bolt right now. And so that'll throw up another thing that we can use. And you know, Peter and I are calling this kind of free range broccoli because it's just going crazy. This is part of the broccoli sort of going to seed. So starting to change, but being around and being on Peter's farm, being able to see these things happen, you know, maybe I'd come through and clip all of these little florets off of here as individuals and then incorporate them into a dish. Daikon radishes. So you can see the radishes are growing, but you know, we've learned to plant these really nice and dense and then get the greens off of here and use Daikon radish greens. Wild arugula, a couple different kinds. So this one will produce some beautiful white flowers. This one, kind of a flowering broccoli. And so Peter has this habit of bringing all of these things to me, and of course, being a person that wants to utilize as many things as I can, I'll find a way. And so that's typically in an Italian restaurant, we found a lot of uses for these things going into pasta, and a lot of the beautiful flowers could be layered into doughs. Here's actually some really big red leaf mustard that we could utilize as well. So we're gonna go ahead and move this, and then we're gonna incorporate it into some pastas.
Let me comment, because that's it's kind of Matthew to do. But I think the key thing there, which was interesting to me, is that he said, Peter will bring me things I don't know they're coming and things I don't really want to use. and the poor guy, that's true. But you know, now and then, what I do, people say, well, what do you do? Well, I characterize myself as the chef to the stars, the Michelin stars, and Matthew is a Michelin-starred chef. And I always thought it was me, of course, but I realized it actually is not me. It's the chefs. It's the chefs that are willing to work with me. Those are the ones that are willing to take what they get and create with it. It's inspirational to them, but those are the kinds of chefs that get Michelin stars. Those are the ones that are the leaders. Those are the ones that are still excited after lots and lots of years at being a chef and creating newness.
I love Peter. I think you're selling yourself just a little bit short, that it's all on the chef side. It certainly takes somebody with vision, as such as yourself, to kind of see what's growing and to actually realize that things are edible and that they have untapped potential. I think actually that's kind of, from what I've seen in your relationship with Matthew, is sort of, you know, it starts with you seeing that there's untapped potential in these places, and Matt just kind of, and you presenting those items to Matt for him to say, oh yes, I see that also, like, here's what I can bring to it.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating. When chefs should go to the farm, any farm they want to, just walk around, because I mentioned, I go, oh, like you could do this with that. And I realize while I'm saying that, they're thinking of 10 things I never would even consider. So it's a little bit of a DreamWorks. You wander around and you go, wow, the possibilities are incredible. And
yeah,
you educate the farmer that way.
And speaking of which, we've got a video from you. You pre-recorded several videos from your place in Yountville to give us a sense of what's happening there, as well as what happens in your mind when you see these things. So let's take a look at this video with Peter kind of showing us how he sees potential in things that others might not see potential. And we'll bring that video up and oh, here we go. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Peter Jacobson. I'm the farmer. Welcome to Jacobson Orchards. You can see the rows that are here. What you're not seeing, or sort of on seeing, is that these have already been harvested. The center part's been cut out of them. It's broccoli. And actually a lot of them are going into flower at this point in time. Except the broccoli rabe is still actually delicious. And actually this would be a broccoli spears. Essentially, because you would be able to sort of toast or cook them up like you would do asparagus spears. But you can see some of the cabbages here. Cabbage is sort of cracked open, but at the same time, if we were going to make coleslaw or something like that, or steam it up, then it's fine. A lot of food goes to waste because it doesn't look perfect. Actually, speaking about not looking perfect, this is a cauliflower. Now you go, ooh, that's really weird, cauliflower. But let me show you something about this cauliflower. Essentially, if I go closely and look at the cauliflower, I can see that, well, this one's one. Look in close at this. And so what it is these are the spears. And the spears are pretty tender, actually. And they look dark. This is a Veronica cauliflower. Actually, it starts out as white, but then darkens up some. And these are actually very tasty. They're pretty sweet. So there's a lot of good food here. Let's take this cauliflower. There's a lot of food right here. There's great green leaves, actually. The leaves are very good themselves. And so this is the kind of thing that ends up, falling to the farmer's feet, as Matt Acarino likes to say. And farmers say, in other words, this is something they can't sell, but it's very edible. And just take some imagination, and maybe at your farmer's market you might have some of these kind of things. I'm going to go ahead and harvest it, and we're going to go ahead. And prep it, because, well, there's a lot of good food here.
And this is where we're getting into the taste along portion of this session. Right. As you can see, when Peter goes through the field, I feel like, Peter, you just kind of can't help yourself. You've got to grab things and eat them. So we don't want you at home to feel left out of that process. So hopefully you've got your items from our taste along. Both I and Peter are super privileged to have our chef Tony prepping items for us. So let me just give you a view actually of my tasting platter here, which I had no part in doing anything with, but I've got my tasting platter. Hopefully you've got all of your items at home as well, ready to taste along with us. We just saw Peter show us his rows of broccoli, his free-range cauliflower. So I encourage you to take a bite of your broccoli, and I've got my little broccoli here. Potentially we also suggested potentially broccoli rabe. This is from a supermarket broccoli, so probably very familiar to you. But one thing I thought that would be really interesting, Peter, during this time as we're tasting along, there you go. Peter's got his. Yeah, well,
I got mine. This is what I brought in for them. And this is what the chef created. And so it's already beautiful. I don't want to eat this. I just want to eat this because it looks so beautiful. Plant forward all the way.
Yes, exactly. So I wonder, as we taste this, and I'll take a bite of this in a moment, is just thinking about, what I see now, having seen your video and looking at this is what's in front of me, but there's so much where this came from that got left behind, right? That doesn't actually make it to the market, that is nonetheless tasty. I wonder if you, Peter, could sort of tell us a little bit more about what you see and taste in the orchard, that we only get part of that by, getting what is at the market.
Yeah, actually we get to taste the broccoli top, and that's great, and it is tasty. But when I cut it off, then there's a plant left underneath. And that plant will now send a bunch of those side ones out so I can harvest those, or your farmer could harvest those. maybe not a farmer that's growing 500 acres of it, but definitely the farmer that's in your restaurant or around your neighborhood. But at the bottom of that is the core. And actually, now that the top is gone, I can peel out the core or the broccoli marrow. And the broccoli marrow is actually fabulous. Got a great crunch to it, easy to pickle, easy to do anything you with, and you've created another dish out of waste. Essentially, it cost you nothing to have that, and now you've got a whole new dish that the patron is delighted to get to taste and pay for.
Mm-hmm. And I took my bite of broccoli, which was delicious. And I actually almost feel like just having gone on this little tour, that even just that piece of broccoli felt a little bit sweeter to me than broccoli might normally have, which I think is lovely. Maybe I'm going to show you also our amazing chef, Tony, split up the different parts of cauliflower for me also. So we've got a little bit of floret here. We've got a little bit of the core, which speaks to what you were saying, Peter, also about, what kind of gets left behind. We often think about the florets, but not the core, as well as the leaf. And I actually have to say, I don't think I have ever tasted just the cauliflower leaf by itself before. I've certainly saved it to put into stocks to make into a vegetable stock, but not by itself. So I'm going to take a bite of this. Maybe, Peter, you can tell us a little bit more about all those parts of the cauliflower that we don't think about.
Yeah, we only get, of course, in the store, you only get the top white part. But usually what I'll do when I take it into Matthew is I'll just cut the whole top off, which includes some beautiful large leaves. And I mean large, and they're nice and tender. They're not bitter. They're not as strong, say, as mustard is. So there's lots of things to be done with it. It's only the chef's imagination that limit the use, because it's all edible.
Yes, absolutely. I took that bite of the leaf. I'm taking a bite now of the core, which I think it's interesting to eat it in succession, because you certainly get that those flavors, but it's with a different texture. It's with a different density. Obviously, the leaf is less dense than the core part is. When you get to the floret, the way it kind of crumbles in your mouth, I think it's fascinating to think that this one plant actually offers so many different experiences.
Yeah, actually, when you say that, it reminds me, when I say it's up to the chef, I can create different plants and different parts of plants. What chefs can create is different preparations. I mean, what will I do? I'll boil it or I'll fry it, or I might steam it. That's all. That's all I know, and that's most of what patrons know. But chefs know all kinds of imaginative things. So that's where they get to apply their skills and knowledge.
Which is amazing. Although another aspect of this opportunivorism, and actually maybe before we keep going with this opportunivorism, I've just been, since you introduced this concept to me some weeks ago, I've been throwing it around everywhere, but maybe let's pause and tell our audience a little bit more about what you term opportunivorism and kind of what goes behind that philosophy.
Right. What it is usually if I go into a restaurant or something like that, they'll come, well, do you have any limitations or, dietary restrictions? I say, no, I'm an opportunivore. I'll eat anything you put in front of me. And I am that. But at the same time, now that you've sort of taken it and made me see it quite differently. In other words, all of us can be opportunivores. A chef can be that way of finding all the possible uses for stuff. From the art of it, I don't know if you all can see this, but I mean, I look closely at this floret. I mean, it is absolutely, what's the background? There it is. It's beautiful. I mean, it looks like an oak tree. I mean, just the shaving that a certain way or putting it, that's the kind of thing that people see at the top of the plate, of course, and go, whoa, where did that come from? I never saw the world. I never saw my food that way. So there's so many opportunities in all these different plant options.
And you being an opportunivore farmer, also / person sort of seeing the world, another aspect of this opportunivorism is seeing the potential for food to grow in new places, which we've already talked about, as you said, 128 feet with some plywood. But we've also got this video of you telling us a little bit more about this guerrilla gardening concept. So let's pull that video up and take a listen.
there's another concept that I think that, well, not too many, well, people will say, oh, I don't have any land, I can't grow anything. Well, that's why they invented guerrilla gardening. I mean, let me take you there. Right here, we got a corner lot. See that old tree? It's broken down. And the person who has the lot didn't really want to do much with it. And I said, can I put seeds on this? And he said, sure, I don't care. And so anyways, these are all seeds. And now you can see it's, well, it's knee high, as it were. Well, there's my knee, this is high. But what's growing here is fava bean tops. Actually, there's radish tops. There's pea tops. All of this is growing, and all of it's edible, actually. I've been harvesting it and giving it to the pizza restaurants. Oh, look, I love these guys. And now we're already starting to get some peas. Look at these blossoms, and they're edible. I love pea tops. What? Actually, I just grew. Otherwise, nothing would be growing here. And so you can find some seeds, find a lot, and well, grow some things.
I kind of love this, Peter, the idea of guerrilla gardening as this subversive, slightly subversive, but also how subversive can, growing some nice things for somebody be, but almost this idea of subversively seeding an abandoned plot or some extra land or whatnot, and growing things, fruiting things, and being able to create something from nothing.
Yeah, I think, yes. I mean, I love it too, and it's inspirational for me to be able to do that. And actually, the guy that I did the lot with, he loves it, actually. He's over there nibbling on it as well. But I think we have to realize that guerrilla gardening is sort of happening all the time by the planet. And let me show you why. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to move over to here. And so right now we're, once again, looking at the garden. And you might go, this is a bunch of weeds. No, actually, this is a bunch of plants, by the way. And so, and all of these plants are doing an important job at this moment. What they're doing is these plants, of course, I don't know if anybody saw the movie Kiss the Ground, but these plants are busy consuming carbon dioxide, and they're putting off oxygen. And so it's just invigorating. So actually, if these kind of gardens or lawns grew throughout the planet, we'd have a lot less carbon dioxide in the air and a lot more oxygen in the air. But speaking of more of Opportunivores, you can see this plant right here. And this is actually mallow, beautiful little leaf, and it's edible. It's born in the green. And actually, if you recognize this plant, any lot in any town almost in the United States has got this weed growing. And if people could nibble on that, they wouldn't live in food deserts any longer, because it's very nutritious. So I think that, once again, the imagination of any of us is our only limiting factor, but understanding plants as well and what's possible with them.
And Peter, we didn't include mallow in our list, in our shopping list for people at home. So tell us a little bit about the flavor, the texture. You just took that bite of mallow. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'll let you catch up with the sound here. You got a little. No,
that's good.
You went rogue.
I get so excited. Yeah, it's hard to control.
Yes. So tell us about the flavor of the mallow.
It's actually very green primarily. It's like mallow sounds like marshmallow. It's not. It's similar though, or I think it's a plant. But it's tasty and nutritious. I mean, it's just like any green, but it's not a strong green. It's sort of almost a sweet green.
And we've got, you mentioned in this past video, we got to keep up with your tasting in the past video also. So we saw fava leaves, we saw pea tops, we saw radish tops. So I've got, and of course we need to acknowledge our incredible fortune here to be in California right now at the very beginning of April, that some of us are able to get these fava leaves and the fava flowers. And I've got some fava beans also here. But for those of you at home who don't have that access to these fresh fava, we recommend, and if you've never tried a fava leaf also, what we recommended was maybe taking a spinach leaf with either a fava bean or a lima bean or another broad bean, and sort of put it together and put it in your mouth so that you get the flavor of the bean, but that texture of the fava leaf. I've I see you chomping in,
Sorry,
Peter.
I'm sitting right here. I'm hungry.
I know. No, it's
Almost
perfect.
lunchtime.
This is taste along is
Okay,
maybe the
there you
best
go.
part of the summit here. So we've got the favas. Let's also take a bite. Obviously, people are familiar, or I'm guessing most people are familiar with peas. We've got various peas, snap peas and sugar snap peas. But the tops, the pea shoots, which probably also people are familiar with. Peter, what do you feel like, how do you sort of distinguish the difference between tops and the peas themselves? Obviously, there's a texture difference, it's different parts of the plants, but how do you think about those different parts of the plants?
Actually, I don't think about too much because I'm not a really good thinker. But what it is that these are cover crops. In other words, you and I think, or we're talking about them, and a chef sees them as food, but the farmer sees them as cover crops. And it's back to what Chad was talking about. They're edible, they're nutritious, they're doing the fixing carbon, they're taking CO2 out of the air. At the same time, these guys are already blooming. And when they're blooming, they're starting to consume their nitrogen. And I use them to fix nitrogen in the soil. And so I'm going to mow this crop down. It's never going to get to beans. All I'm ever going to have is pea tops. So that's what I mean. It's you've got to think about what's possible, as opposed to, as Dan Barber calls them, the darlings of the garden, the tomatoes and the celeries and the peas. All of those only grow in a short time, and the land is there all that time. So the other 9 months of the year is when we need to start thinking about plant forward, fixing the planet that way, fixing our diets that way. And so I see them, and the chef would see them. Once again, you've got to go into the garden, go into the fields, small farms, large farms, just to see it your way, not the farmer's way. So you can, and then ask the farmer. Farmers are brilliant people, actually. Don't forget, they run multi-million-dollar businesses. I mean, you think a stove costs a lot of money, wait until you buy a harvester or a thrasher at $1.5 million and try and amortize that per bushel. So essentially, they're good business people as well. So you need to partner with them.
Yes. And you mentioned cover crops. We've got this next video talking about cover crops, which feels especially timely right now as we come into spring in Napa Valley. So we are going to check out this video where you talk a little bit more about the role of cover crops and how they play into your garden and your farm, but also some of the culinary applications.
It's beautiful this time of year. Actually, the almonds have already bloomed, but as you can see, some of the trees are blooming. We'll look at them so close up. But the orchard and the cover crop is, well, it's all mustard out there. Napa Valley is famous for its mustard, and you can see how spectacular it is. But let's look a little more closely at it. This mustard right here is like all the rest of them, except an accumulation. But you can see it's got beautiful sets of flowers on it. The flowers are edible. They don't taste good, but they're edible. Actually, they don't taste that bad. What I love about some of these sort of things is, like, for instance, right here. This is a flower bud that's about to bloom. And actually, it's also tasty. Essentially, it looks like broccoli rabe, a little tiny piece of broccoli rabe, because these are all brassicas. And they all have these little joints coming off of them. Actually, here's some other, well, let's look at it this way. I could harvest this whole plant. I could harvest some of these ornaments to this up. I could actually harvest these little guys because they'd be beautiful, say, on top of a pasta. And I could get some of these bigger leaves, actually, and chop it up and turn it into pasta. Why do I know that? Actually, because Matt Accarino told me that. I found out I can grow a lot of these things, but Matt actually has the skills, the talent, the knowledge to figure out what to do with them. I mean, I like to think that's why they invented chefs.
So Napa, as I wash in mustard right now, I'm actually wearing my mustard color sweater to represent the mustard here in the valley right now. We know some of you at home, again, may not have access to mustard flowers, but we've got some here. But if you don't have access to the mustard flowers, you could try some of the dried yellow mustard powder. or mustard seeds, the yellow mustard seeds also. We've got a few here, as well as mustard greens, of course. I was gonna.
Yeah, I tried it. It's hot. Tastes like mustard flowers.
That is probably, yes. How does it compare, Peter?
Actually,
the mustard.
It's a little stronger than mustard, but it has that same sort of powderiness to it. Actually, I grow the regular mustard to have the hotter mustard flowers, and they have a sting. The red mustard that Matt showed you and the frilly mustard flowers, but they have real personality to them, just like the mustard powder does.
I love that characterization of the personality of them, that they've got a hot personality. They got a great personality. Well, Peter, this was a super fun dive into what happens not only in your orchard, but again, this glimpse into what is happening in your head when you look at the fields and what's growing in there, as well as your palate, hearing from you sort of what we're tasting and what we're experiencing. Let's zoom back for a moment. At the very beginning, we saw the video. I'm going to put my mustard down for now. We saw this video of Matt with all of these amazing greens and produce that you had dropped off for him. So let's talk about what you actually gathered for him. And we're going to see these videos now from your orchard. So tell us what we're seeing here.
So yeah, now I'm starting to harvest a variety of. Oh, there was essentially a whole mustard flavor here. Now I'm definitely harvesting the mustards, and I'll take big handfuls of it. And what's nice, the chefs will set these big bouquets of mustard on the counter, and so as at the pass in the restaurant, and so the patrons see that, and then they'll see them snip a little bit off and chop it, and so it sort of connects the whole. Everything. In other words, the flavors and the presentation and everything goes right to their plate. So it's an exciting time for the guests to be participating in the whole process.
Yes.
These are Fava Tops. I'm selecting out some Fava Tops because it's cover crop. They're all mixed together. Favas, peas, oats, mustard, vetch. Only some of those are edible. Actually, Dan Barber and Row 7 Seeds are trying to invent a more edible cover crop because you could go real favas, or you could go real peas, or you could grow daikons. Daikons are, of course, those long radishes. What they do is they drive a deep root into the ground. Oh, I'm gathering mustard now, green mustard for sauteing. Deep roots into the ground, and they are tractor crops. They break the the ground apart so that the soil's broken up. But essentially, you can get an edible tractor crop and pull it out. Well, that's what the Row 7 is working on at this point, and other farmers have, I'm sure, as well. I must be digging up some. Oh, they're radishes, actually. The pictures are so small on these computer things.
Yes, and we heard Matt actually talk earlier about how you have planted those radishes so close together because you're less concerned about the root and you're trying to use those greens, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's what you'd have to do in a cover crop because that's what the farmer needs. But humans can also harvest off it.
Which is amazing. So as we're watching the rest of this, we just saw you take out some fennel at the very beginning. We've got some arugula and watercress. So we've got on our tasting trays and maybe at home also, I've got some fennel, including these fennel prawns. But one thing we mentioned, as many of you probably know.
SPQR. There you go.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Dropping
it
things
off
at
SPQR. Yeah, yes. We've got the fennel prawns.
Yes, fennel. And as some of you probably know, licorice, black licorice flavor, very similar to fennel. So thank you again, Chef Tony. I've got some licorice jelly bellies, which I'm guessing there's somebody going around very happy that the black jelly bellies are no longer in their mix. So that is great.
It's true. Actually, the Jelly Belly factory is right about 50 miles from here. So anybody that comes to visit Copia can go to the Jelly Belly factory. But yeah, no, we've got the fennel. But actually what it is that usually when you see the fennel, you go, yeah, that's fennel. And I put it on now and then. I already know it. No, actually, you may know it, but you don't know the tender little hearts of fennel. And so they're much sweeter, nice flavor. And when you eat them up, you can swallow them instead of having too much cellulose, you have to spit them out. So it's another way of seeing the same plant. And whether you add it to a dessert or whether you add it to a salad, it matches and goes together.
Yes, I love that. Speaking of salad, we had arugula also. So feel free to take a bite of your arugula and watercress. And I'm noting we're getting so caught up in all of this tasting. I have not been keeping a good eye on the time. So we need to jump ahead. We've got, we saw you harvesting all of these items for Matt Accarino. Let's see what he did after your visit, and see this chef creativity at work here.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna bring together the pasta sheets with the flours laid in. I'll show you how we do that. Ball of dough that's been made and then rested. We'll start by usually take this into quarters, thereabouts. Take this, use a little bit of flour. We use coarse semolina when we're doing this, but you could also use 00 or AP. We've got it kind of out to the widest, all the way open. We'll run it through once on the thickest setting. About medium thickness, people always ask me what number. I don't look at the numbers, I just look at the dough. So now, for instance, grab some fava leaves. I'll take these, and I am a bit cognizant to make sure that I'm grabbing and cutting none of the stem, just the leaf itself. Anything really thick would pop through the pasta. So, got as many of these cut as we can. You can do this with any of the flours as well. We've got most of these cut. Going about half of it. Start laying these in. Definitely either the more colorful or uniform, like these large fava leaves are really delicious, but they also have quite a presence in the dough. So when you'll see that when I sheet this through. Really what we're doing is we're making kind of a pasta sandwich. So we've got end to end. Okay, and then I'll bring this back over. And you notice I've worked quickly, so my dough is still mostly moist, and it'll stick to itself on its own. I don't need to apply any kind of water. If it got dried out, I guess I could put a bit of water on it. We're gonna go back to a coarser setting or a thicker setting. And then run this through once. And that kind of seals it, not much has changed. A little finer. I'm gonna just go gradually. You'll start to see, now you can start to see the leaves a bit more. I'm gonna go ahead and dust this a little bit more semolina, both sides, finer again. Now we're starting to really stretch those leaves. Maybe one more time. Right through the dough and how it's pushed the leaves, push that flavor into the dough and creates that unique pattern.
That is amazing. I think seeing, as you said, that creativity of the chef, and we're going to have Matt joining us after this session during the Opportunivore Challenge. So we'll certainly get a chance to ask him a little bit more about this process of putting the cover crops into the pasta.
Yeah, no, it always amazes me. It always mesmerizes me to watch him do these things or just create for that. What I also love is he takes fava tops and other kinds of tops and sautés them with onions, lays out some bread dough. We'll smear that over roll that up, and then slice it end to end. And he's got a cover crop dinner roll. Just as simple and straightforward as that. It's beautiful, delicious.
It is amazing. We are getting to the end of the session, but we've got just a few more items that we haven't yet tasted. So we've got the Daikon Radish, and I'm looking on my little tray here for my Daikon Radish. So here's the here's our little Daikon Radish spear. We saw you digging that up and talking about it, and then of course, oops, I've got my little Daikon rounds here that I'm going to take a bite out of. I love, sorry, don't mind me while I just snack along while we chat, but
good radish.
Yeah, Peter, we unfortunately, due to time, we're going to have to cut one of the videos we were going to show about sort of vegetable butchery, which is we had you had been slicing the tops of the Daikon radish, because it's not just sort of as you talked about, and I'm just going to pull this piece, like this as a whole, that is, right. You can actually think of this as smaller components. And different parts that can be utilized to different effect.
Yeah, I love the concept of whole vegetable butchery. And I apologize for any vegan whatever, but paralleling it to meat, but essentially the whole vegetables can also be broken down. So I can pull a whole daikon out when it's flowering. I get the daikon, I get the big leaves for grinding up the hamburgers, as it were. I get the little tiny, these daikons are everywhere. Those little tiny flour getting started. The sort of the pork chop or the lamb chop of the plant. In other words, there's parallels to breaking down whole animals and breaking down whole plants. They're all utilizable. Which is amazing. We, as I mentioned, we don't have the time to show that video right now, but we'll post it so that you at home can still see it and benefit from Peter's wisdom. And we've got to close out the session. So actually we've got one more video to show people sort of wrapping up with some closing thoughts around how to see opportunity in food and land all around you.
Hi, here we are on a country road in Napa. Actually, it's a beautiful morning. And as you can see, the valley is, well, clear. It's late September. Excuse me, it's late February. Oh, time flies, whatever. And it's all mustard. These are vineyards, actually, and the valley turns bright yellow with mustard flowers. It's an important cover crop. It's feeding the soil, but at the same time, it's feeding our souls as well. It's beautiful. And drawing that in nurtures us in many ways we don't ever understand, but are always important. Another spot on the country road. And once again, another way of being fed. Turns out I was farming here, and a lady walks by, about 80 years old, and she says, "Do you farm here?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are those fava plants?" And she was pointing to these plants over here. And I said, "Yes, they're fava beans." She says, "Oh, I remember those. I used to be a little girl, and when I was around 6 years old, I'd wait at the bus stop, and my grandmother had fava plants, and so I'd eat the beans off the plants. It was such a fabulous time." And so for her, the memory, the thoughts, taking it all back, all of that was emotionally and otherwise very satisfying. Once again, the way plants feed us.
Amazing. Yeah, Peter, we've got we've still got you actually for some additional time, and Matt will be joining us. So I don't want people to think that this is the end of our time with Peter. But before we do that, before we jump into that Opportunivores session and chat with Matt as well, I've got just a couple of housekeeping announcements that I am going to go through. We've just begun because Matt will be joining us live, and we encourage you all to join us on screen with Matt and Peter, as well as show us your Opportunivore ingredient. By the way, I've got mine ready to go, and see how they might ideate around it. I'll give you instructions on how to do that in just a moment. But first, we hope you'll join us again next year in Napa Valley, April 26th through the 28th in 2022, or before then at Menus of Change in June virtually, or Worlds of Flavor in Napa Valley next November. Thank you once again to New Wave Foods for helping us close out this year's conference with such interactive opportunities. And thank you to all of our sponsors for their continued support of this program. And thank you to the amazing chefs and presenters for bringing their recipes, personal stories, insights, and experience to us. Thank you also to all of my CIA colleagues who have put in countless hours to bring this program to life, all working in very different environments than we are used to, including being on this balcony. I want to give a shout out to Garrett, MV Ellen, Steve, Evan, Patty, Chad, Greg, Casey, Sheris, Katie, Tony, and especially Caitlin and Christina for making this such an amazing summit. And finally, to each and every one of you out there for joining us not only this week, but every day in our collective efforts to push plant forward to greater heights within our industry. We hope to see you all in Napa in 2022.